repeat the nonconformist oath. I promise to be different. I promise to be unique. I promise not to repeat things other people say.
And welcome to Positive Blatherings with Fitz. That's me, Fitz, and I'm in my podcast studio, Rockvox Recording and Production, in luxuriously beautiful Bushnell's Basin. And my guest today is Jona Wright. Did I get that right, Jona?
Correct.
Sorry. This is take 3 because the first 2 takes I completely murdered, including Jona's name. But we have been going back and forth for about a year on LinkedIn. I think I reached out to you about last year saying, hey, I'd love to have you on the show and talk about what you do and the things that you're working on. And it just hasn't happened. And now we're finally doing it, but now we're doing it remotely because of the whole COVID thing. And it's just easier for everyone and safer, even though we are COVID compliant here at Rockvox, just in case you were wondering. But something that was on your LinkedIn, your About Me in LinkedIn that I really found interesting that I wanted to talk to you about. And you call yourself a divergent thinking specialist. And that really got me thinking, like, and another thing you put in is it thrives on opportunity to transform people. And so those were 2 thoughts that I really was like, I'm interested to find out more about what that is and what you do. So let's start off with tell me about yourself and what you're working on right now and how you kind of the abridged version of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So around here, I'm at work right now, but around here, some people will call it, what's your crooked mile story? And I look at it as opportunity, right? Opportunity awaits. And not to go to spirituality, but the universe gives you what you need. Mm-hmm. So I am by trade a speech language therapist and a reading teacher. However, I'm an HR director right now for North America in a local manufacturer. And I've had opportunity laid out in front of me. So that's where I love positive blatherings, and everyone needs a dose of positivity. So if we look for it, it's there. So who I am, I'm Jona Wright. I'm a Rochesterian through and through. Grew up here in this fabulous city. And again, we have so much opportunity here right around us. What I'm currently doing, I do work in the world of HR. COVID has turned into my life recently. But we've recently had conversations around here too. We can get into the grimness of it and how it closes everyone in, or we can look at, it causes opportunity. And here we are. Yeah. I got back to this message, reached back out, and we're focused on the same things at work. We're meeting people globally through some courageous conversations, some midweek mindfulness conversations throughout the company, and talking to counterparts in China and over in Europe and in locations where we wouldn't otherwise get to meet those people. So it is forcing us to all act differently, but it also is breeding some different chances that we might not get otherwise to meet some people and to get to know some others that might be strangers in a different time. So you brought up a couple things on my LinkedIn, and a divergent thinking specialist. Recently, I was given a personal assessment, and on that, I was told, one of my extreme scores was around change management and change. So I'm a change agent. I like change. I don't mind change, whereas some people, change can really be very scary.
Sure.
And so I think that if we can think about how to think bigger about the ideas that are in front of us and diverge instead of just converge on where our mind would go to automatically, we can see possibilities. And so I did do a graduate program locally, and I don't know if I can give a plug for the institution, but I went through So St. John Fisher, I'm a cardinal all the way through, but I did my dissertation there, and it was around innovation. And that's really what prompted the divergent thinking and the focus on that. so many times we get to know as human beings, we're judging beings, and how can we break ourselves of that habit? So as I think about that in people development, it's really thinking about how to have regular conversations with people about their own behaviors, their own practices, and do that self-reflection for, are we getting to know too quickly? Are we looking at all the possibilities? And there are some simple things we can do to really change our mindsets around some of that. And I think that's become a big buzzword recently. Mindset. Are we growth mindset, or are we fixed mindset? So looking at turning things into questions, and looking at how to get to that next level of divergence versus just immediately going to what we already know.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to get on the other piece too, but you go right ahead.
So I when I listen to all of these words you're saying, and I know they're in they're in the form of a sentence, in many sentences, but my mind, I'm a creative thinker. I'm a visual person. I have to write something down to learn it. I have to read it out loud. You know what I mean? And so a lot of the things you're talking to me about are very abstract. They're very abstract ideas. Would you be able to create a case study, create some sort of a case where you could say, this is what I'm talking about when I, like in your job now, like in human resources, if that is that a term that's still used, HR?
It is a term that's still used.
Because I've heard HR being merging into other things like what is it, thought development, or I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about though?
Yep. People department, people operations.
I've heard so many different.
Yeah, we can think in terms of, cognition and people's thinking, instead of the old-fashioned learning and development, agile thinking, those types of things too. So I think it all kind of plays into that a little bit. And so to answer your question around taking away from the abstractness, I think there are some simple things we can do. And case studies, there's tons of them out there. But I think just even doing something in our own lives, if we think about doing something we don't like to do, and sometimes the first thing we go to is, I can't, or that'll never work, and there are some question stems we can implement, and we can think of things about how might we, instead of using I can't, take that right out and say, how might I? So, it's in beautiful Rochester, the beautiful Rochester area today. I'm looking out my window. There's a little snow on the ground still. And so, I can't go outside. It's so cold out this morning. So how might I go outside? It opens up all the ideas where I can't is definitely converging. Converging is narrowing in on one idea, and divergent is opening, if you think about a funnel, opening the funnel to all those ideas. So when we say, how might I go outside today? It's cold out. You can add in that little editorial. You could write down 10, 15, 20 ideas about how might I go outside. I might not at all. But if I was going to, I'm going to grab my biggest parka, an umbrella, and then, hey, at the end of the week, I might put shorts and a t-shirt back on. Who knows? So it's a very deliberate practice to turn things into questions. And yes, the terms divergent and convergent probably aren't regular terms that everyone uses. But it's really looking at convergence is coming in and deciding on one idea. And we do that as humans a lot, all too much. Because of our background, our whatever we've been exposed to over time, we can really quickly move to judgment and say, this is the only way, this is the way it'll work, this is the way it's worked in the past, or we've seen it work and it doesn't work that way, but we're still going to go down that path. We leave a whole bunch of opportunity behind by not taking the time to open up to different ideas.
So then how you fit into all this is that companies look to you to find a way to reach their employees, their workforce, to change their way of thinking, to change how they're approaching certain problems and certain things that are happening in their company. Is that correct?
Well, I currently work in a manufacturer, so I'm not at the disposal of others other than within this company and anywhere else that I can touch. But yeah, absolutely, I like to think of myself as a change ambassador, an innovation ambassador, and a mindset ambassador. And I do, if I have the chance to challenge family, friends, coworkers, others to think about their thinking, then that's a better place to get anyone. So I did do some consulting previously, and I was working with organizations, and it was very much around mindset and bringing people some different tools around how to think about things. In one assessment we did use, it's the Foresight Breakthrough Thinking tool. But if we think about problem solving, it can be in a 4-step cycle. And we like to identify the problem. So come up with some of the details of the problem, and then come up with an idea, and then look at the development or the plan of the idea, and then the implementation of that plan. So if we think about those 4 steps in the cycle, there are different tools that can be used at each step of those in that cycle. So again, if we were thinking about mindset and change, lots of people can come up with lots of ideas, but if we're only ideators or we only sit in that idea space, we'll never move anything to action. So it's very advantageous, beneficial to identify how people think. And there's tons of assessments and tools out there to do so. And at the very basic level, it can help collaboration and communication within teams to get to know how, you and I think and how we think differently, and what you can bring to me and what I can bring to you. But that does start with mindset, and are people in the space to accept that? Scott, am I going to accept what you're saying and how you think about things, because it's going to be different than how I think about things? I think now more than ever, we have the most brain development and science around the brain that we ever have.
Yeah.
And I think that we can take such advantage of it. So it's a great place to be.
How did you get to that place? At what point in your formative years in school did you see this path come before you? Because it's very specific, and I assume, not knowing anything, just my gut reaction is that you're a helper. You like to help people. You like to make sure that, are you okay? Are you comfortable? Do you have everything you need? What can I do to help you get there? I assume, I don't know you. I've never seen you before this day, except for your LinkedIn picture. But that's my assumption of the kind of person that you are based on what you're telling me. Am I close? Am I close to the mark there?
It's true. Yes, it's true. It's true. A couple things there. I think that as supervisors, managers, leaders, I think that the term management and leadership are still put together, and they are very different. Management gets stuff done, and leaders really do inspire. And I think that there is time that we have to take to inspire others and get to know others and get to know what they want and what they don't want. And I think sometimes we move so quickly and the pace is so fast that we don't spend time there. So I am passionate about that. I think that's how I got into human resources. I say humans as resources because everyone has something to offer. How did I get there? I've always kind of danced to the beat of my own drum. I don't know if it has anything to do with schooling. My mother will agree. I'm the middle child. I've always done things a little bit differently. But my grandfather owned service stations, and I do attribute, I have a servant leadership mentality. Servant leadership is an interesting topic because people hear it and say, as a leader, I'm not here to serve others. Yeah, you are. We have to remove obstacles, get things out of people's way in order to get them to the next level. That is our job. And I think that I attribute it to my grandfather and watching him remove obstacles from so many people's lives. As he owned service stations and was in the community as a servant helper, as a servant leader. So that's where I attribute some of that going to. Being a speech language therapist and a reading teacher earlier in my career, and then working to be a school and district administrator, I always saw myself as of service to others.
Definitely as a teacher. And
yeah.
I just want to go back a little bit to what you were saying with that I thought was quite interesting is the separation of, or the difference between management and leadership. Because that's an interesting concept, because I think of an effective manager should be a good leader, and a good leader should have good management skills.
Yes.
But you've separated them in a way that I think is very interesting. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll go to history, and my program at Fisher was in executive leadership. So it was tons of theories of leadership, but things that I had seen across my own career, and it was inspiring to pursue more knowledge around leadership. Everyone's a leader. I recently put out, Happy Bosses Day to everybody. And I said, even if you're the boss of your own household, the boss of, a side gig or a side hustle, the boss of truly a team at work. We don't really refer to people as bosses anymore. Mm-hmm. But, we all have to think of ourselves as leaders, whether it's in a church group or someplace else. So I do make that differentiation, because I do go to inspiration, and people, I know it's a little cliche, but people will follow leaders. They want to follow and emanate whatever the energy is that leader is putting off. They inspire them, and it is usually some type of positive energy around that. I think that so many times organizations get caught up in the bottom line, and it's the delivery, and that is very important. But at the heart of all of that is people, and people have feelings, and we have to be compassionate around feelings as well. And I think now more than ever, we do have to think of the people side of things. We continue to come to work. Some of us have the opportunity to work remotely. And so having that viewpoint of all of those varied levels of how people are working, and really thinking about that, and how are we going to continue to engage and inspire. It's moved so quickly. But to go back to the differentiation between manager and leader, management is the tactical, getting things out the door on a daily basis, making sure things are on time, making sure orders are met, or the tasks of the day are done, whereas a leader is really checking in with people and getting the tasks done, but at the same time in a way that goes to how that person wants to be treated. I had a conversation with a colleague a while ago around the golden rule versus the platinum rule. The golden rule, we all learn, is treat others how you want to be treated. And I don't know what book it is. Tom Rath's got a book out there. It's not emotional intelligence, but it's another one. But I'll think about it in a minute. But he really talks about the platinum rule, and it really resonated with me. Treat others how they want to be treated. And I think that leaders take the time to get to know their teammates. And there's always a fine line of getting to know too much or sharing too much, but getting to know enough that people feel important. They feel as though they're on your radar screen. You think about them every now and then, whether it's a joke or something that you share in common. It's that treating others how they want to be treated. In recognition alone in companies, things can be purchased for people, items, gifts, whatever, meals, but it's also making sure that's how that person wants to be treated. So many times people don't want to be up in front of a group. And how do we usually recognize people? Starting from grade schools, we put kids up on stages and make them walk in front of a huge audience. It's great. It desensitizes them to some of those things. But what's the life result there? What's the purpose? And so many times adults really don't want to be put in front of that crowd either. So it's taking the time, writing a thank you note, writing a letter to somebody that's meaningful, in letting them know you're thinking about them.
Do you see a difference in leadership styles, say from even just 20 years ago to today? I seem to, and I'm not by any means any kind of an expert, just generally speaking, in any kind of job that I've had over the last 20 years, I know that some of the bosses or leaders that I had when I was younger, just starting out in working, even when it was like a job in high school, from then to now, I've noticed a huge difference in the way people lead. It's not always a positive. It's not always a positive change either.
No.
What's your gut feeling about how leadership has changed over the years?
I think there has been a transformation. I think that people are a little bit more focused on, is it a manager or a leader? And how, like you said, how can we bring the two together? Exactly like you said, you have to get stuff done and help remove some of the obstacles and get to that tactical. But the other part of it is getting to know your teams and inspiring them, getting them to develop and move on to where they need to move on. And I don't always mean up. It might be a different skill set. So I've seen a big change. I think that very much terminology I hear here, and I agree with it, is, top down, command and control. I think gone are the days of, because title and position in a company say so, that's why you have a subordinate do what they do.
Right.
I am always of the mindset that I will roll up my sleeves and I will not ask a team member to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So I'm not going to go ask you to clean the toilet if I haven't cleaned the toilet myself.
Yeah.
But I think that we've seen, whether it's through research, the Jack Welches of the world, whatever it is, that transformation in what we think about leadership and management is definitely where we are today. Being emotionally intelligent. I just had a conversation with a colleague that experienced some loss in the family. And it's all about who is there and who showed up and who was present. And, we all have conflicts and weekend things going on, but it is about, was that meaningful and did people show up for that person? And I think that's where leaders do distinguish themselves in showing up and being present. It may be not physically, but a card, again, some type of note saying, I'm thinking about you during this tough time.
Absolutely.
And I think that, there's, if we Googled, leadership, there's thousands of theories about leadership, but it's about self-awareness. It's about, who am I? Am I aware of how I'm coming across? Am I aware of how I'm making other people feel? And that is where the emotional intelligence aspect comes in. I had a really interesting question posed recently, and I thought it was a great one. What does it feel like to be on the other side of me? Huh. And I think that's a great question for leaders.
That is a great question.
And also if they're willing to be very honest about that. So I think that, if you're barking orders because things need to get done, feel like what that feels like to be on the other side of you. Or are we inspiring somebody? And I keep using that word over and over. I'm trying to think of a different word. But are we inspiring somebody to move to action in a different way or be comfortable with something that is posing discomfort?
I think that the biggest takeaway that I have out of everything you just said, that the most important part of that is the term emotional intelligence. And I know firsthand how terrible a lack of emotional intelligence, how bad that is for a team, because I was one of the team members who had a boss, a manager who lacked emotional intelligence. He did not ever. There was never a time where he would ask the "What's it like to be on the other side of me?" question. Never in a million years would he be asked that, because he wouldn't have liked the answer.
Right. Right.
And so all of that is so key for, and not even just in the employment situation, but just in everyday human interaction.
Sure.
Just that respect of another person, regardless of if it's a transaction at work or if it's a transaction over the retail counter or whatever it is.
Yes.
Yes. Everyone should be asking that question of each other. What's it like on the other side of me? That is huge. And man, I feel like there's I don't want to like bring politics into it, but I feel like that there's a breakdown of that question. Right now, that's how I feel. I feel like what's it like on the other side of me? And then you have some people that's saying, well, I don't really care. It's all about me, and I don't care what you think about me because I'm going to get what I want to get and move on.
Yeah. I
how do you
agree.
deal with that in the workplace? How do you deal with that as an HR professional? How do you deal with that when that comes up in the workplace? That has got to be a really difficult thing.
I'm gonna quickly go back to my earlier career in being in education. I worked with an emotionally handicapped population, and I came up against that. Maybe not what it was like to be on the other side of me, but my intolerance for some behaviors. And I was working with some pretty tough kids, but I had a teaching assistant sit down with me one day and say, Joey's mom sends her very best to school every single day. She loves him, and she sends him to school for us to care about and give him the best back. And that's how long the conversation was, 2 minutes or less. But it was life-changing for me because it wasn't about his misbehaviors. It really wasn't about who he was or what judgment I was putting on that situation. It was about what he was able to bring to the situation and the tools and the compensation he had to even cope with the situation. And I take that through my life. And maybe I'm idealistic, but when I come across a difficult employee or team or situation, I do look around at, we never know what somebody else is dealing with. So when you said the retail counter and think about what it feels like to be on the other side of you, I could be in a fit of anger at Wegmans and go up to that customer service department and demand whatever I needed. Or I could also assume maybe somebody else is going through something rough that day too, and I need to bring my best self to that situation. There's some type of quote that says something about, to the world, we're just one, but to one, we might be the world. Right. Be that one person that's going to change somebody else's day, and we're not going for the negative impact there. Let's go for the positive impact. And it takes 2 seconds. It takes 2 seconds to shift how we're going to approach a situation. So I do go in with the spirit of inquiry to difficult situations. I want to know more because behavior is communication. And if we can get to why somebody is behaving the way they're behaving, we can usually start to dissect or pull apart what it is and how that person's presenting. So I go back to a leader of your team, and maybe he wouldn't want that feedback, but finding somebody that can sit down with that person and say, hey, there's this perception, and would you be willing to have a deeper conversation about it? And how can we make that conversation safe? And it does start with self-awareness, because somebody's got to be ready to hear the feedback. And a good practice that I like to think is a good practice is not to put somebody in a situation where they clearly are not ready to hear that, because it breeds negativity, it breeds toxicity. But I think that it's also getting people face to face. And how can I be the intermediary to help somebody get face to face? Because what I won't do is create a triangle. I will not listen to somebody about a problem with somebody else. What will come of that is, hey, when can we solve this problem? Give me some time and dates that work, and I'll sit down with you and help you get through that conversation. I do ask people to really trust me on that. I do think that I've been pretty successful at bridging some conflicts. It might still be that people don't agree with each other, but they can work a little bit better together. And I think that's at least a step forward. I think we shy away from conflict as humans, and sometimes we need to lean in and figure it out.
That's tough. That's tough to do. I know that over the last probably 5 years, that's been something that I've tried to work on. One of the reasons why I put together this podcast was a couple of reasons. One, to just speak with people who are on the positive side of life, whether it be in their job, in their personal life, art, anything like that, using positive practices to move forward and to, affect real positive change for themselves and the world. Also to become a better listener, so I could sit, and that's why it's called Blatherings, because I don't really put together a lot of questions, because I want to listen to what you have to say so I can formulate how I respond and figure out where the conversation is going to go from there. Every once in a while, I'm like, geez, I don't really know. I don't know where I'm going to go after this. But so one question I had for you is so when I was growing up, I was in the Civil Air Patrol, which is an auxiliary of the United States Air Force. I really wanted to be in the military back when I was 15, 16 years old. And I was on a good path of being a good leader. I became the squadron commander, and everybody respected me. And I got that way because of other cadets that were older than me that I learned from. And one of the things that they always said was lead by respect and example. And I know that the military leadership isn't always the right way to go in certain situations, because it's like we said before, it's like you do this because I say you do it, not you don't have to know why. But I think the respect and example part is the important takeaway, because just like you said, I'm not going to tell anyone to do something that I haven't done myself or am not prepared to do. How does someone today, what is the best resource for someone today to learn? And I know this is kind of a weird question, but to learn to be a leader, to learn to be a good leader. And I know mentorship has a lot to do with that. But if someone's listening to this and says, they finally have this eureka moment, decide that they stink as a leader, what resources could they use to try to figure out what good leadership is?
Wow. It's such a great question. Such a great question. I mean, because anyone can go to the leadership section at Barnes & Noble and pick up a book and start reading. You have to find something that really resonates with you.
So it's a personal thing.
Yeah. And Scott, I think something you said just a minute ago is listening. Is somebody willing to listen? I have found over the course of my career, and I suffered from it when I had my first leadership role, I call it a beginner's mistake, is thinking that I had to know everything. I had to have all the answers. I had to say, no, this is how we're going to do it. And I think that the term vulnerability gets thrown around a little bit, and people, we started the conversation with, it's a little ambiguous, it's a little abstract. And I look at vulnerability as not airing all the skeletons in your closet, being honest, all of that stuff that has a place in time, and maybe even doesn't have a place in time. But I do look at vulnerability as the ability of a leader to say, I don't know. And what do you guys think? Now, there might need to be a disclaimer on that. I'm asking you guys what you think, not because we're going to necessarily implement anything, but it's data gathering. And I think that if a leader can listen and understand what they're being surrounded by, that's when, it's a little cliche when we say we surround ourselves by our gap areas, or find people that can fill in our gaps. Yeah. If we listen, we can find those people that can help us create the solution. And that is where I'm thrilled when I hear the terms, I don't want to get into too much terminology, but in design thinking, co-creating. If we think about a child, we can just do for them, or we can co-create with them. It creates curiosity, it creates inquiry, and it creates the ability for them to start spreading their own wings and do it themselves. And I think that's the other misconception with leadership, is that as a leader, I'm supposed to do it all. No, I've got to give opportunity to my team members too, for them to grow and develop, and also decide what they like and don't like, so that we can continue to develop them in a way that makes sense. And I think the other thing too, though, besides listening and vulnerability is total self-awareness. And again, going back to whether it was your boss or anyone's boss, do they have self-awareness to know the image that they're portraying might not be what they think of themselves? And is there a gap in between? I was given an assessment recently, and the people that delivered it said, "Can we play a little game?" And I said, "Sure." And they said, "Or we could just deliver the report." I said, "Of course, I just want the report delivered. I want to read it as you're going through it." But we played a self-awareness game, and it was, where did I rate myself compared to what the assessment said? So, of course, I passed with flying colors. No, just kidding. But it is truly, against those attributes. Did I think grossly highly of myself? Was I belittling myself? Or was I really kind of where the ratings came across? And I think that it's asking questions and not just giving feedback, but getting the feedback. So in that conversation with that prior leader, was that leader also asking for feedback and saying, "Hey, how am I doing?" And being honest without repercussion. And I think that's a trust thing, that if you're going to say it, then do it too.
Yeah.
You can't say you're not going to have any repercussion and then go back to somebody and kind of chastise them, punish them, consequence them for giving some honest feedback. So I think there's a few different things. You did start to say it's got to come from within too, though, and I think it is true.
I have not in all my years. Now I'm self-employed, but I don't believe I've ever had maybe one employer or manager that's ever asked us for feedback on how they're doing. And I assume that is a trend that's being incorporated more and more these days.
I can only speak for myself. I do ask my team members for feedback, and sometimes I got to get ready because I know it's not going to always be the best. We're moving.
Tell me how you think.
We're moving fast and furious lately, but it is listening to them, because again, they're communicating and letting me know, "Hey, I need a little help over here. Can you throw me a lifeline?" Whatever it is, or maybe it's just a listening ear, or, "Hey, you're moving really quick. Do you need help with something? Because this is how you look. You look like your hair's on fire," or something like that. It is quite interesting. I live in a culture here of very much two-way feedback, and I kind of forget the outside world doesn't always operate that way. My kids laugh. I have a 14 and a 16-year-old, and they laugh because, the Karen thing. But I will, I will give feedback in a very kind way if there is something that I feel like, especially, business owners right now, everyone's so vulnerable, but is there an instance to give somebody feedback to better their practice? And truly that's it. I do go to, what's the intention of the feedback? Are you really trying to coach somebody? Are you really trying to evaluate them or move them along? Maybe look at some of their practices and hope for a change. And I think it has to be kind, necessary, and true. And I go to the kindness part too. And sometimes the kindness and the human resources end is it's not working so well. And that is kind, because we don't want to hold somebody up in their career. We don't want to hold somebody up in exploring opportunities. And we don't want to get to a place where it's unkind and it just has to end. So I do go to kind, necessary, and true, and then really intentionality. If your intention for 1 second is to slam somebody, you better sit on that feedback for about 24 hours and find a different way to deliver it. So
That's
too many times I've been in instances where somebody just goes for the punch, and that's not how a leader wants to be remembered. Leaders won't do that.
Yeah, no. Really need to think before you say stuff. And the one thing that I always thought was interesting back in my days in corporate America was the self-evaluation. And I am the kind of person that would say, I did okay. I was all right. I would never say, oh, I crushed that. I was awesome. But I wouldn't say that I was terrible either. I would always be right down the middle. What does that mean? What does that mean from your point of view, from someone who's on the other side of that? When you see, employees that do their own self-assessments, how do you read those and say, well, here's a person who clearly, thinks less of themselves, or some people clearly think they're way better than what they are. Yeah. I mean, I've never been on the other side of that. I'm interested to see what that's like from your point of view.
I think you hit the nail on the head. There are some people that they won't take the proud bragging moments, and then you get some other people that I'm like, okay, I don't think it was that big a project, but man, they think that they just solved world peace. So if you're in that place where I'm seeing more kind of vague overview type of, I thought it was pretty good, or I have zero hesitation in calling up somebody and say, would you knock it out of the park on with that? We have moved to a self-evaluation, really appraisal system. I'll say performance management system. I won't say appraisal system because there's no ratings involved at all anymore. But the questions as the employee, the questions to my supervisor for me are, what did you do well this month? Where did you add significant value? What did you like? What didn't you like? Is there anything else you need me to know? And that's where it can get into if there's a personal thing that somebody needs to know. But I very much look forward to those conversations and those prompts. And I've actually, to my own team, I've actually sent them back at times if they're one sentence. I really want to know on my end, it's what are 1 to 3 things that that the team member did well. Where are some opportunities, and then it gets into some goals things. But I like to really give that specific feedback around, what 1 to 3 things went really well. And I think that's someplace where we lack sometimes is in that feedback. You did a great job. It's kind of peanut butter. Let's spread it over. And the more specific we can be, the more people understand what we're looking for, what we're appreciating. But I think that we've got to encourage team members to do that same thing. So when I see vague feedback or self-reflection, I have no problem giving somebody a call and saying, come on, brag a little bit. What did you do really, really well? What did you do that somebody else couldn't have done? And maybe it's a competency. Maybe it's just a communication thing. Maybe it's just, I reached out to somebody else. And sometimes it's just some of those prompts to get somebody to think about something else. I go a lot of times to, people don't always need to move up in rank and role, but have we taught somebody else something that's in our craft or in our discipline? And I think that teaching and coaching are underrated. And I think that those are a lot of things that can be celebrated in an organization, is somebody's ability to teach somebody else what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Mentorship is one of the themes with my show. I always ask everybody who is their mentor. And I mean, I'm not going to say that your grandfather was your mentor. Your grandfather was the one that kind of put you on the service path. Who would you say is your mentor in your profession?
I have a few different mentors.
It's an amalgam of mentors.
I have a few different mentors, and actually, I try to go cross-disciplinary sometimes too. So because human resources touches so many aspects of a business, I do pull on, my sister's a marketing manager, my sister-in-law's a marketing manager. I just put those two together. I didn't realize that. But I do go sometimes to the outside, their perspective of, hey, if this was going on, or this development happened, or even just personal reflection. Hey, let me give you this scenario. How did this sound, or how did this go? My mom is a big mentor. She was a single parent. She did not have the opportunity to pursue a career. She was a stay-at-home mom, and then had to go out into the work world. So she had to navigate some ambiguity and deal with some difficult situations. So she doesn't always understand my work world, but she is a good sounding board all the time. I have a couple other mentors in the area. The National Human Resource Association in the Rochester area. Rochester area is a very strong human resource. It has a very strong human resource landscape.
Yeah.
So there are a couple mentors in the area that I go to and just give a call to every now and then, or work with on a regular basis.
I think what all of the things that you talked about during this episode would, first of all, I'm intrigued because these are things. Now, I don't have a staff, but I'm a filmmaker, and when I'm on set for a film, I do have a crew. And I think a lot of these, what's the word I'm looking for? Systems, I don't know, practices of how to deal with a team, how to communicate to a team, how to get feedback from a team. I think that's all so very important. I think more small businesses, those that don't have a human resources department, those that don't have someone where there's no go-between, there's the boss / manager and the crew, and there's no one there to say, all right, so this is how you do this when you talk to them. I think it would be very advantageous for a lot of small businesses to learn this kind of craft that you've perfected or in the process of perfecting. I like to say that nobody's perfect, so but I'd say
I always tell my kids,
you're really close.
Perfect.
You're really close. You're doing the best.
I don't know about that.
All right, so you're doing the best you can. How about that? Does that
always
work?
Working. We're always works in progress, right?
What kind of advice would you give someone who's just starting off in the workforce right now? Just any kind of advice.
Wow. Show up.
Yes.
Seriously.
No, that's yes, absolutely.
Ghosting is becoming more and more of an issue.
Oh man.
Yeah, actually, Scott, it's a great question though. But honestly, I think that what we're seeing, and not to go to politics or anything like that, but I think that sometimes people are afraid to come to work right now, not knowing what the COVID landscape looks like in a workplace. And there are safe workplaces out there. There are places that are really being diligent about keeping employees safe. So I would say that's one aspect. Be open. And that's, there you go. There's ambiguous and abstract, right? But are you going in to learn whatever an organization is willing to teach you? And whether it is a teenager, somebody out of college delivering pizzas, just to have a part-time gig, or somebody re-entering the workforce and retooling themselves and transitioning maybe from one career to the other, be open and take advantage of everything that's around you. We've talked about it a little bit. There are leaders that are not, or managers that are not maybe the best role models. I've had a couple of them, but I've also taken bits and pieces from that of what not to do. And so I think assume best intentions, assume that somebody is always coming to you with their best, and what can you learn from that environment or from that organization. And if it's not a fit and it's not good for the person, or it's not feeling right for the organization, move on. It's time, and it's okay. And there's tons of opportunity out there right now.
Well, Jona, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk about some positivity and some practices that more people need to at least learn as far as leadership and management. This has all been very interesting for me, and I hope whoever's listening and or watching also is getting the same out of it that I did. I thank you so much for your time. It's been great.
I thank you, and thank you for introducing me to positive blatherings. Again, I commend you for your work. I think that if it's in the small scope of Rochester, or it's on a much larger scale, who can't use a little more positivity, or thinking more about positivity in their lives on a daily basis. Absolutely. So thank you. Thanks for the invite, and thanks for letting me spend time with you.
And you say stay safe.
Yes. Yes. That's our number one focus here. So
Exactly.
There we go. There we go.
Everything's
so much.
on the other. Everything's on the other table across. I have 2 Lysols and a hand sanitizer, and they're all over there.
Well, I think it would have been cooler to come in this studio, but I guess I didn't realize that was still an option. I assumed it was everyone was staying remote. So.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to. I redesigned the studio so that there's more space. Plus, I have 2 studios.
Yeah.
So I can be in one and a guest can be in the other, or I have people that if we're across the table from each other, we're about 8.5 feet apart.
Oh, there you go.
So it's just next to me is a little close, but there's usually 2 or 3 people and I have them spread apart. So
Gotcha. Well, very cool.
yes, very cool. I'm glad we finally made the time to get together and discuss. These are all things that I don't necessarily understand right off the bat. When I consider myself a pretty decent leader in most settings, not all settings, but I feel like I'm good at. I always have what's the word? Subordinates? I don't like to use that word.
Team members. Colleagues.
Team members that I'm in charge of. I always feel like it's my duty to impart knowledge, and to explain, like, all right, so this is why I'm doing this. This is how you have to do it, but this is why you have to do it this way. And if you come up with a different way that's better, please show me. That kind of thing. I've always kind of prided myself on being able to do that, but I always also feel like there's so much to learn when dealing with people, because we're forever evolving and things are always changing. And this discussion 10, 15 years ago, their jaws would drop down to the ground. They'd be like, what are you saying?
Yes.
That's crazy talk.
Because it was just do it because I said so. One of my biggest go-tos, mentors, if you will, is Simon Sinek. And I just hinged on the second he came out with whatever talk he did first about why. And I think that even little kids, just let them understand why, and they're going to just evolve and do something for you. And I also go to Dale Carnegie's principles and make somebody think it's kind of their way of thinking, get to their way of thinking. But also just talk to people how they want to be talked to. Again, if we come swooping in as leaders, managers, whatever, and just kind of come in and say, this is the way it has to be. Now, if it's a safety thing, you know what? Come in and tell them. Them it's going to happen that way, and that's it. Yeah. But I agree. I think 10 or 15 years ago, 20 years ago, if you had said, oh, yeah, we're going to tell the team, here's the project, you decide how it's going to happen. Oh, my gosh, it would have been holy ruckus.
What?
But I think now, I always say, I work here and I work with 400 other really smart people. There's somebody out here that knows a ton more than I do about a lot of different things. So I can, like you, I can learn every day.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this tantalizing conversation.